possible that we could get to the moon or Mars? I see some heads shaking this way this time. I believe it is. So will it happen? I imagine it will at some point. That's a big pull. I'm going to go live on the moon. I mean, you know, you read about Lake Como in Italy. I think living on the moon would be a little cooler, but a little harder too. So interesting area. And there might be some related disciplines like asteroid mining and stuff like that, or other space-related things that you might want to get into. Okay, I hope that you think throughout this semester, what are the kinds of things that you want to get into, and as you listen to our guests, that you try to apply the lessons they're teaching to the context that you're in. Let's see, guys at the back in the chairs. Fire marshal's going to have a problem with us. I think that what we need to do, we've got lots of seats down in here. If you could just find a chair down in here. I'm sorry that's inconvenient, you know, but yeah, come on down. Okay, let's see. So let's talk about what entrepreneurship is, okay? So anybody here speak French? What does entrepreneur mean in French? Business person, somebody who sells things. Now let's go to the roots of the word. Yes, please.
Well, it's on the board, but like undertake. So entre means kind of between.
Okay.
And then preneur means somebody who's taking. It's like a person that's taking. So it's like, I would say undertaking, and not in like the grave digger sense, but more of like somebody that's taken on a challenge.
Yeah, I like to write the word undertaker here because that's very stark and it makes you think of something. But yes, entre is more between, and but yes, somebody who takes. So an entrepreneur, I'm going to define it this way. So thank you for the good French pronunciation, by the way. One who undertakes an enterprise, one who owns and manages a business, a person who takes the risk of profit or loss, and that's from the Oxford English Dictionary. That's an entrepreneur. So there is some element of risk. Is it risky being an entrepreneur? What are your thoughts on that? Is it risky to be an entrepreneur? What happens if you fail? This might be an interesting question for some of our guests. I've had guests come to this class who say, you know, the riskier path for me is not being an entrepreneur. There is a lot less risk for me in being an entrepreneur than not being an entrepreneur. Seth?
And he talks about risk in the sense of like risk versus consequences. Right? So sometimes risk is like what a value we add to like an amount of danger in it, but consequence is like really like what that danger will do to us. And so anyways, I always like to think of it in that situation because like starting a company when you're in school and you don't have too many responsibilities besides just grades, like risk is relatively low and the consequences are low, right?
Yeah.
But as you move through life, you add more responsibility, which means your consequences grow and your risk grows.
As a student, if your business goes belly up, you know, what's the consequence? Maybe you have a little credit card debt that you hadn't hoped to have, and maybe that's more debt than you ever thought you might have. But that's a lot different than saying, oh, I just bet the mortgage on my home on this business that looks like it's going belly up. Yeah, there's different levels of consequence associated with the risk. Okay, well, but there is some element of risk, in fact, probably in all of the paths that you take. All right, so what is tech entrepreneurship? This is my definition of tech entrepreneurship. We have lots of seats. Come on down and sit in one of the seats, please. I think the fire marshal is going to want us to keep the stairs clear. Okay, so tech entrepreneurship is the creation, cultivation, and management of ventures whose core products are based on information technology. So one of the common denominators of tech startups is that they are scalable. What does scalable mean to you? When I say that word scalable, what does it mean? You can grow it. You can grow it. Now, you can grow any business, but so what's the difference between a non-scalable business that grows and a scalable business that grows?
I would say a lot of industries are limited by your community or physical
So how widely can it grow? Yes, please.
Usually scalable is associated with like marginal costs. So scalable ventures, it costs very little to build them, whereas non-scalable ventures usually have like very large fixed costs or asset investments that have to be made. So that makes it a lot trickier in terms of like growing the size of the business.
Spoken like a true finance or econ major.
Strategy.
Strategy, yes, thank you. Okay. So scalable ventures are those that can grow wildly. When you think virality, a scalable venture has some viral component to it at some level, or it could. Now, the nice thing about these scalable ventures is they do create wealth. That helps you to expand your sphere of influence. And you can make a bigger difference when you have access to more resources. And entrepreneurs typically are not all about, okay, how do I accumulate as much as I can accumulate? Entrepreneurs are about, how do I change the world? How do I make a difference? That's what ought to drive you. If you're just in it to get rich, there are lots of other ways to get rich. If you're in it to make a difference, that's where we're looking for entrepreneurs. Okay, now, why did we create the Rollins Center? It's because our world is increasingly networked and digitized. And you all have grown up in that world. And the implications of this are really deep. We want to help prepare our students to be leaders in this environment. And we ask ourselves the question, why can't our students be the ones who create the next Google or YouTube or whatever else? We had a couple of students who were in your seats just a few years ago who built a company called Scan. Does anybody know the Scan story at all? Have you used it to scan QR codes? They were originally QR Code City. They took second place in what was then called the Business Plan Competition at BYU, which, when you take second place, that kind of puts a chip on your shoulder, and you want to say, I'm going to show you. And they did. And they sold to Snapchat for, well, it was supposed to be a private number, but based on a hacker leaking some documents, we think it was $50 million. And they were just a couple of students in your seats just a few years ago. Guys, when you come on in, come on down and sit in one of the real chairs, okay, please? Yeah, let's keep the aisles and the steps free. Yeah, please. Okay, now, so we think that you can be great entrepreneurs, and so we've created the Rollins Center. And I want to play a little commercial for the Rollins Center. Let's see if this will work. Uh-oh, wrong output. Hang on, pause. Okay. Should have checked this before class started. Come on, system preferences. Where are you? Okay, it's here somewhere, but I don't know where. Hang on. You know what? I'm just going to play it. I'm going to turn up the sound on this thing, and I'm just going to... There isn't really an audio track. Okay, here we go. Oh, wait, that's not working either. You can't see it. Okay, this is a really cool private video I'm showing myself. All right. And I cannot even find it here. There we go. All right, let me retry, sorry. So, sorry about the technology fail there. But if you'd like more information, pull out your phones and text Rollins to 77222 and you'll get some more information. Anyway, I will go back to my PowerPoint slides. Okay, the Rollins Center has a lot of resources. We give away a lot of money each year. We give away hundreds of thousands of dollars each year. And there are some great classes. I've listed some of them here. I'm not going to spend much time on these slides. I'm just going to whip through. There are not only the Rollins Center, but some other centers as well. Housed here in the Marriott School, there's a lot of clubs, and we do an app competition that I run. So if you want to develop an app and submit it to our competition, I'll probably give you some money for it. Not to buy it, but to say, hey, you're a good app developer. Here's some money. And everybody likes to hear that, right? We provide mentors, and there are lots of resources. We've got some great books that typically our mentors will ask you to read one of these books before you meet with them. And we've got a great library up in 470 of the Tanner Building. And anyway, so let me show you one other thing, I guess, while I'm thinking about it. Here's the homepage to the Rollins Center. And you click right here, or you go to the Get Started, and under the drop-down, there's a Schedule an Advisement session. You can meet with one of our student entrepreneur advisors. And, whoops, wrong window, sorry. But if you'd like to learn how to make German sourdough bread, we can load that one. This one. I've been exploring my bread-making talents. Okay, Preston Walston, Zoya Ali, Ben Osguthorpe, Stephen Jarman. You can select any one of these students to go set up an advisement session with, and they'll walk you through some things that I think would be helpful if you're trying to figure out the lay of the land. And is entrepreneurship something you want to explore more of? Or what are the resources available to you? And stuff like that. Okay, so now tech entrepreneurs need to know a lot of stuff. And my bottom line on this is you either need to be excellent at technology or you need to have a friend who's a good geek. So either you're that person or you know somebody who's willing to work with you who's that person. And you've also got to be good at the business and interpersonal relationship stuff. And so there's a lot of content you have to know, and there's a lot of human skills that you have to know as a tech entrepreneur. So let's dig into the three principles. This is where I want to spend the bulk of my time. So let's talk about network effect, disruptive innovation, and exponential technology growth, aka Moore's Law. And let's see what we can learn about those. Okay, a network effect occurs when a product becomes more valuable as more people use the product. Does your car become more valuable when more people use it? Does my pen become more valuable because lots of people are using it? Not necessarily. There's nothing inherent about a lot of people using my pen. In fact, it's less convenient for me to have other people using my pen or my car. Over time, the ink is going to drain down. My car is going to wear out. So there's not necessarily a network effect that exists there. But here I've listed 4 products or technologies that become more valuable because more people use them. So think about the telephone network. Alexander Graham Bell, rewind a few years here. Alexander Graham Bell invents the telephone. What good is it having 2 devices on the telephone network? How much value is there in that network? Now, it might be pretty high. Alexander can call his wife and say, hey, honey, I'll be home soon. Just thought you'd want to know I'm thinking about you. Bonus points. But when you add another person into that telephone network, now Alexander can call 2 people, and each of them can call 2 other stations. And you see, the value continues to go up as the size of the network goes up. With 1,000 different connection points, now every person has 999 other people they can connect to, or other points they can call. And so what happens here is that the value of that whole network goes up as people use it. Now, the World Wide Web is another one. It was kind of a curiosity back in the early days. Does anybody know the protocol that preceded HTTP? Did anybody ever use Gopher? Okay, go dig into Wikipedia and you can read about the predecessor to the World Wide Web. Gopher was text-based. It had hyperlinks. You could you could connect documents to each other, but it didn't have pictures and didn't have sound. And anyway, but the World Wide Web becomes more valuable as more people get on there because I have a larger audience I can reach. If I'm a company and I'm putting a website up there about my company, it's more valuable to me because there are more people joining the web. And so that's what sets up the conditions for a network effect. Robert Metcalfe was the founder of 3Com, and he invented Ethernet. So Metcalfe, he came up with a law that stated the value of a network increases in proportion to the square of the number of users. So if there's, what's 1 squared? And 2 squared? 4. So adding a second person exponentially increases the value from 1 to 4. What's 3 squared? 9, and then 16, and 25, and so on. And you can see that the curve is going to go up in an exponential fashion, the value curve, if his law is correct. So up here, this is worth 2 units. Now we've got 5. It's proportional to 5 squared. It's proportional to 25 units of value. And now you just add a few more connections, and now we're talking hundreds. It's proportional to hundreds in terms of value. What typically happens in a situation like this is that the initial cost of the network is really large. If you were trying to be a cell phone company, it would cost you a lot of money to go build towers and to wire those towers to the internet somehow, or to whatever technology you were going to use to share the data from tower to tower. But the incremental cost to add 1 more user is relatively small. When that happens, you get a network effect in your product. So I mentioned English as having a network effect. Why would I say that? Why could English have a network effect? How is it more valuable as more people use it? So if I'm a software developer and I'm looking for open source software, if I speak Spanish, there will be a much smaller set of open source software that I have access to than if I speak English. Most of the open source software is going to be documented in English. And so learning English gives me access to a much larger set. Now, on the same hand, as soon as that person from another country learns English, now they're going to be able to be a resource to me. And so my command of the English language is more valuable because there are more people that I can interact with who have that same skill set. And so in software development anyway, and this might be different for other languages, but in software development, English has become a common language to communicate with other software developers in around the world, no matter what country they're in. In diplomatic circles, what languages traditionally have been used? Anybody know? What would the United Nations encourage you to study? French would be one of the diplomatic languages. Yes. Okay. Lingua franca. Anyway. Okay. Now, with the network effect, you get this thing that we call a winner-take-all situation. Among competing technologies, the winner takes all, and this is because of feedback on comparative utility of different products that are out there. So, let's look at the case of the Apple iPhone. How many of you today have an iPhone? Okay, let's see, that's roughly, keep them up. How many hands? Okay, it's roughly a little more than half, maybe 2/3. Okay, how many have an Android phone? Okay, a good number, but about half as many as have iPhones. So we have kind of 2 winners in this marketplace. How many of you have a Windows phone? Oh, how many have ever had a Windows phone? Okay, a few hands. All right, but you've gone with a different product for obvious reasons. You've done what I'm talking about here. Okay, users like to buy iPhone because lots of developers write software for the iPhone. Developers like to write software for the iPhone because lots of users buy it, so it's a big market. In the US, the numbers we saw here are pretty typical. Internationally, it flips. Internationally, Android is more popular than iPhone because Android is less expensive. Apple charges a premium. Anyway, so we get this users and developers are iterating on this feedback loop here. I want to go where the users are. Users want to go where the good apps are. And so network takes all. Network effect, winner takes all, sorry. Any questions on this principle, network effect? When you're creating a technology, you hope to create a network effect. It won't always be the case that you can, but when you can, that's magic. Let's think of some other products I haven't listed where you see a network effect. YouTube and Instagram are great examples. Okay, YouTube for videos and Instagram for photos. And in fact, I see people in my circles using Instagram more than Facebook now because, well, for certain purposes. Anyway, how many of you are YouTube users? Does anybody want to say they're not a YouTube user? Okay, I don't see any hands there. Okay, so that's winner took all. How about Instagram? Anybody want to say you're not an Instagram user? Okay, so we have a few hands there. But 90% of the audience is an Instagram user. Okay, any others that you can think of where you see a network effect? Please. Amazon. What's the network effect there? What have they owned?
Well, more people are going to want to put their products on Amazon because there's more users and more digital users because those products are.
Yeah, you can buy anything in the world, they say, practically. It's almost true, but not quite. But you can buy a lot of stuff on Amazon. And how many of you bought something from Amazon over the Christmas holiday? Okay. Has anybody here not bought from Amazon ever? I'm not getting any hands on that one. Okay, so winner took all there too. Interesting. So you can think of others too. There's a reason why Jeff Bezos is pretty wealthy and some of these other folks. All right, now let's talk about principles of disruptive innovation. This is really a cool one. Clayton Christensen, who is one of our Latter-day Saint friends, he has been a professor at Harvard for many years. He's well respected and he's a strategy guy, so strategy. But he did his dissertation on this idea of disruptive innovation. And he said, look, disruptive innovations displace entrenched technologies, and it's not because they perform better, but rather because they provide a better overall value. What you're doing is you're doing an innovation, creating an innovation that alters the basis on which you compete. And so let's look at how this works and what that all means. Okay, I've got a graph here. Time is this dimension, and performance is this dimension. Performance going up vertically, time going forward to the right. Over time, a market is going to demand greater performance. So let's think about this. The car that my dad had when I was a kid, it was an old Rambler, probably out of the 60s. I remember that I think it was a standard transmission. It might have been automatic, but it wouldn't have had more than 3 gears if it was automatic. 3 on the tree, as they used to say. You would roll the windows up with a crank. You'd lock the doors by pushing a button. There was a key slot that you had to put a key into to unlock the door. Air conditioning, we had 255 air conditioning. Roll down both windows while you're driving 55 miles an hour, and then you had air conditioning. That's an old person's joke. Okay. And we had to walk uphill in the snow both ways to get to school and home again. Anyway, so over time, though, that was in the 60s and 70s. Now we're here in the 2020s. And I expect my car to have, automatic windows that I push a button and they roll up or down. In fact, my mirrors are going to fold in and out. I expect to be able to, actually, I have a key that sits in my pocket. I never pull it out. It just recognizes, the car recognizes I'm close to the car, and it says, "Oh, my master's back, thank you." No, it doesn't say that. It says, "You touch the handle with that key in your pocket, and I will unlock the car for you and let you in. And you push that little button, and I will drive. I'll turn on the engine. You don't even have to put a key in." And to me, that still is a marvelous thing. I've kind of gotten used to having the key in my pocket and letting all that happen. But I remember the days of putting a key in and turning it to start. Okay, what other things do you expect of your cars today that may be different from 20 years ago? What features do you rely on?
Backup cameras.
Backup cameras, yeah, great one. Bluetooth, yeah, you want to connect that device and sync it up. Others?
Built-in navigation.
Built-in navigation. And I have that, although I never use it. Well, I sometimes will show the map just to see the streets that it knows about, but the streets have changed, and my phone is going to be more accurate. But you can't look at your phone while you're driving, but anyway, right? Okay, please, here and then here.
Integration with cell phone technologies like apps.
App integration, Apple, Android, CarPlay, and anyway, whatever the names are. Yes? Cruise control and adaptive cruise control. So it says, you're 50 feet away from that car, we're going to slow you down a little bit more. Yeah, all of these things. Okay, well, so our technology is changing over time. The market demands more performance. There's low-end performance and high-end performance. And I'm guessing that most of you don't have a car that has lane-keeping capabilities, where if you start to get out of the lane, it'll kind of adjust automatically for you. I don't have that either. But that would be at the high end of what the market demands today. At the low end, you're still probably going to have automatic door locks and windows and air conditioning and stuff like that. Okay, here's a sustaining technology. It's introduced to the market, it satisfies the low end, but they quickly work on it, and it gets better and better and better until it's kind of more of a high-end kind of a product. Can you think of any brands that have done that? They started off kind of low and trashy, and now they're kind of viewed as cool. My father-in-law thinks Audi and BMW are two examples of that. Oh, those cars are garbage.
Maybe
eBay, yeah, kind of, okay, buy used stuff, and now you can get kind of cool stuff there, okay? Any other brands that started out low end and now are, please? Amazon, okay, very good. It was kind of kitschy at first. New Balance shoes, absolutely. AMD, today they have some awesome processors, and at CES they were a topic of discussion saying, hey, they're starting to eat Intel's lunch in this certain area over here. Yeah, so you've seen it happen. There are brands that you think are low end, and then over time they work to get to the high end. And they keep on progressing, and they get even beyond what the market demands because they're listening to their very best customers, and they're doing more than you necessarily want to pay for. How many of you have used all the features of Word? Now think it through. How many features are there? And I don't think any human being except for the testers at Microsoft have used all the features of Word. So you probably can't even figure out what all the features are. They're embedded behind some documentation page somewhere. Okay, along comes a disruptive innovation, and it follows a trajectory of development. At first you look at it and you say, at the low end I minimally expect this, and you're way out here. That is just laughable. That is a joke technology. I am not going to pay attention to you. But over time, they develop the technology, and look what happens when it crosses over into the low end. Where's the sustaining technology? It's way above the high end. So what does that tell you about the cost of the product? How much is it probably going to cost for that green line? It's probably expensive. While this thing it's a value product. And you say, okay, look, I'm going to go buy the value product. Can you think of a decision where you bought a value product instead of the high-end thing that's really nice? Please.
Instead of buying like name brand cereal, I'll just buy like the Malto meal.
Okay, Malto meal, yeah. Instead of General Mills, I'm going to buy Malto meal. And it's basically the same thing. And any generic drug is the same it's the same principle, right? Or you go to Costco and you get the Kirkland brand, or the store brand of whatever, okay? And maybe you'll notice a quality difference, but it's not a big enough quality difference that you say, this starving student cares. You say, no, that's just fine. I'm good with that. The value. And that's what happens. That's how a disruptive innovation works. What happens is you work on an underserved or an unserved market, and you go serve that market, and they will tolerate something that's below the low end. They'll tolerate that for a while, and you'll have time to work on it. And by the time you get to where the mainstream market is willing to pay attention to you, now you're this great value proposition. Can you think of any car brands that have done this? Hyundai. How many of you have a Hyundai? Okay. It used to be that we were embarrassed to say, I have a Hyundai. But let's see, they even have a luxury vehicle now, don't they? The Genesis. Is that what it is? Anyway, whatever that high-end vehicle was, I remember reading the first review about it, and one of the cons, you have pros and cons. I think Edmunds listed as a con to this one. Yeah, you have to tell your friends that you've paid 85 grand for a Hyundai, or whatever the brand happened to be. So there's a little bit of that game going on too. But you see the idea of a disruptive innovation. You work in an area that they don't care about, and by the time you're into what they would care about, they can't see it really coming, and you blindside them, and you take the world by storm. And that's what Clayton Christensen saw when he did his dissertation. As manufacturers took floppy disks that used to be really big, and the next generation would come along and they'd introduce a smaller one, the entrenched players couldn't see the innovations coming. They were paying attention to their best customers and doing what their best customers told them. And you look at this other technology and it's a joke until it isn't, and it's too late to change at that point. Anyway, read his stuff and you'll figure out how to deal with disruptive innovations. Okay, so that's the next thing. First we had network effect. It's ideal when you can get a network effect. The second thing is you want to have a disruptive innovation if you can, where you're going to alter the basis on which you're competing, and you work in this one area, and all of a sudden you take the world by storm when you're ready to. Then the third issue here, the third principle is Moore's Law. Now, Gordon Moore is the co-founder of Intel, or he was. In 1965, which is the year I was born, he made this observation. Every 18 to 24 months, the number of transistors on our chips is doubling. Now, I have a screenshot or a picture from Wikipedia here, and this plots all of the Intel processors and the transistor counts on each of the Intel processors over time. And this goes up to 2018 or 19, whatever the latest is up here. And does it look fairly linear? This is plotted in a log linear fashion, meaning that, see the scale on the left, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, a million. So it's going up logarithmically. And so this is really a very steep curve going up like that, but you see the linear aspect to it, which demonstrates that it actually is doubling every 2 years. Here's the kind of thing they do now with their chips. They get bigger packages, and they, it's not all that they can fit it in the same amount of space, twice as many. Sometimes they make the package bigger, but they found ways to double the number of transistors on their CPUs every 2 years. That red line is the 24-month doubling line, doubling every 24 months. Now, if you've done the math in your head, how many years ago was this that Gordon Moore made this observation? 55 years ago. I'll turn 55 later this year. If you double every 2 years, how many doublings have we had in 55 years? 27, 27 and a half, 27. Okay, here's what it looks like when you start doubling. First you have 1, then you have 2, then you have 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, etc. Okay, you can do the math. There's a story that goes along with this notion of doubling. So the emperor of China, it said, met the inventor of the game of chess. Now Go's the big thing in his day, and now along comes this game called chess. And he talks to the inventor of chess, and he says, man, this is a great game. I really like this. Let me give you a reward. What would you like? And so the inventor of the game thinks, chessboard. Okay, tell you what. Let's take 1 grain of rice for the first square, 2 grains of rice for the second square, 4 for the third, and so on until we cover the board. And the emperor, before thinking it through, says, okay, could he fulfill that request? How many grains of rice would he have needed? A chessboard is 8 by 8. There are 64 squares. So 2 to the 64th, or half of that, 2 to the 63rd, that's a big number. I think that's more than we have atoms in the visible universe. So there's no way that he was going to fill that chessboard doubling every square. He wouldn't have gotten past a few rows. Okay, anyway, so That's what happens when you double. Now, when you double, here are the things in technology terms that happen to us. You increase your computational power. You increase the capacity to store. You increase your bandwidth. And this all happens at a decreasing cost per unit and increasing network connectivity. So, your cell phone today can run rings around the computer that flew the Apollo missions to the moon. Okay? You have way more power than they even thought about. How big of a hard drive do you have for your computer? Either laptop or home computer? Anybody have a terabyte hard drive? Anybody have a 4 terabyte hard drive? Anything bigger than 4? Okay, when I was sorry, this is going to sound like the uphill and the snow both directions. When I was a young whippersnapper, we used to have floppy disks, and then we had hard drives. Well, the first hard drive that I played with was a 5 megabyte hard drive, and we were really happy to have a 5 megabyte hard drive. That Heathkit had 56 kilobytes of RAM. That's because my dad bought the upgrade unit. How much RAM do you have in your laptop today? 8 gigabytes, 16, 32? Some number like that. It's measured in gigabytes probably, not megabytes or kilobytes. This is because of Moore's Law. By increasing the number of transistors on our chips, we're able to store more, we're able to compute faster, and it just costs a lot less. Now, bandwidth. How many of you have fiber coming to your home or apartment? Do you like the speed? I love doing network here at BYU because I can go download stuff really fast. At my home, I have DSL, and I have a paltry 60 megabits per second, which means I really have a fraction of that. But driving down the road, I can access the world's information through if I'm the passenger in the car, through my handheld device here. That's amazing to me. I can connect anywhere. And that's because technology has been pushing out all over the place. Okay, well, what happens when we have these circumstances, we get to increase our speed and capacity, and we get to lower the cost of our technology. And that means we can process information faster, which lets us rethink how we're doing stuff, and we innovate some more, and we develop new services, new products. And hopefully we have a network effect, and that increases our demand for more technology. So we put more money into our R&D, and this leads to this virtuous cycle that's been happening my whole life long. For 55 years, this has been happening. By the way, we'll post these slides after class. Now, technology's been changing rapidly for a lot of years, and now business is changing just as rapidly, and the models you use are just all over the place. And you can disrupt in business the same way you could disrupt in technology. You need the ability to creatively solve problems, and you're going to have to retool over and over again. I find myself, for those 3 IS classes I told you about, I find myself spending many hundreds of hours each year trying to retool and stay up to date. The technologies are always changing. And I'm in the process of teaching the same class I taught before a year ago and totally retooling it for a new technology. You might even need to invent your own job in this new world that you live in. So know that business is evolving very rapidly, and pay attention to the trends. We don't have time to talk about the trends, but pay attention to them and learn about them, study them, and see where the opportunities are. It might be terraforming. Now, this semester, I want you to watch for these principles and trends. So watch for the 3 that I talked about, and look for the use of socially networked and mobile technology and the people who come and present, and then think about how can you use information to transform and to innovate, because you're the people who can make this happen. I hope that you won't just sit there and just watch all of this in front of you as just kind of another movie, but that you'll actually get involved and network. So here's my contact information, the Rollins Center website, especially that schedule and advisement session. All right, we will see you guys next week with our first outside guest. Thank you very much.